All right, I've got another military memoir here. This is Hunting the Jackal by Billy Waugh with Tim Keown, and he's written or been a co-author on a lot of military memoirs. But anyway, wanted to talk about this one. If you've watched any of my channel, you know I love military memoirs. I think that there's something to learn from all of them. But this one is especially cool for a couple reasons. So, Hunting the Jackal, a special forces and CIA soldier's 50 years on the front lines of the war against terrorism. That right there is kind of what made me read this book. I mean, this is someone who served the country for 50 years, 5 decades in the military, and then doing black ops stuff with the CIA. There's very, very few people like this, and what makes Billy even more rare is that he was a Vietnam veteran. I mean, he fought in Vietnam and fought in the War on Terror, Operation Enduring Freedom. And I don't know how many of them there were. I imagine that there are, he might even be the only one. I mean, there's so few people. And so it makes for just a cool story, a cool backdrop to the story in the sense of like war has changed dramatically, obviously, in those 50 years. If you think back to Vietnam era and now to where we are at today, although I don't think he's still fighting today. But I mean, we're at a place now here in 2026 where wars are, it's a lot of drones. Not to say that there aren't people. Of course there are, special forces in particular, but it's so much drone warfare when you think back to when Billy was fighting. I mean, he was a front lines guy, right? Like sitting in the rice paddies in Vietnam. And it just makes for a cool backdrop to a memoir of someone who can speak to that whole spectrum of war and what it does to people. So anyway, this is his story, right? It's his story of the 50 years. He brushes up against a lot of infamous terrorists, including Osama Bin Laden. If you're familiar at all with the backstory of Bin Laden and the US and some of our allies and the errors they made, the kind of missteps they took. We had a lot of chances to take out Bin Laden much, much sooner than we did. And when I say we, I mean the United States, not me in particular. But we didn't. And people like Billy have stories about that. And I've read many, many books that tell similar stories where it's like the troops on the ground knew the truth. The people in the know knew what they needed to know. But the bureaucrats, the politicians always step in. And it's a very rarely talked about story, especially in the mainstream media because obvious reasons. They want to cover this stuff up. But we had so many chances to take out guys like Bin Laden. And Billy is an example. This is one of many books that I have read who talk about that story. So he goes through in detail of all of his 50 years. Pretty crazy to think about someone who served not only in the military, but then spent a bunch of time doing black ops stuff. And when he was doing black ops stuff for the CIA, he hunted down Carlos the Jackal, who that's kind of the title of the book, Hunting the Jackal. The Jackal is another infamous and elusive assassin in history that you can read about if you want. Otherwise, you can find it here in Billy's book. But I remember the first time I read a book like this. Like, you see movies, if you're new to this stuff, you see movies like, I remember watching like the Bourne movies, the Bourne Identity, things like that, and thinking like, how fiction that was and how fantastical it was. And I'm not suggesting that those movies aren't obviously made up or anything, but there are real life people that have lives like that. And obviously Hollywood pumps that stuff up. But I remember reading books like that and like this and thinking to myself, I just didn't realize that a lot of that stuff really does go on. We have people all over the world today doing things that we don't want to talk about because we don't want to know about it, but it's all in pursuit of our freedom. As the famous quote goes, we sleep soundly, our freedom's defended thanks to men like Billy Waugh, right? There's I'm someone who believes in that. And so, it's always not to suggest like there are obviously people who are against war and us doing things in other countries, but I always have felt like the troops on the ground, the Billies of the world, were out there doing the best they could to make a difference, right? Those are the ones that are they're meeting with people. They're seeing firsthand what goes on in these second and third world countries and how poorly people are treated. And these guys are making a difference. They're doing the best they can to make a difference. Does it mean it doesn't get all mucked up with politicians and bureaucrats? Yes, of course it does. And then anytime something goes wrong, they try to spin it. And oftentimes it's the soldiers, the boots on the ground that get the blame. But these guys like Billy are out there making a huge difference. I'm pretty sure he's still alive to this day. So anyways, that's the story, Hunting the Jackal. Quick review here. I love these little books too. These kind of the old-fashioned small books that there's something about these that just kind of have a real draw to me. So really enjoyed this book by Billy Waugh with Tim Keown. Hope you like it if you decide to read it. Thanks for watching.